Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is Lionel Ketchian, and I'm here with George Ortega, and we're here to talk about happiness because, as far as we're concerned, happiness is always has been and always will be the point of it all. Today we'll be talking about happiness and focus. And George and I were talking a little before the show, and you've probably heard the old statement that what you focus on expands. So what you decide to look at is not only what you're looking at now, but what you're most probably creating for the future moments and the future moments beyond that. So focus becomes a pretty interesting subject to focus on. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So George, this is an excellent topic that you've picked and selected, and I commend you as always on really hitting the arrow where it should fall.
Thanks. Yeah, because we were constantly promoting all these different kinds of ways to be happy, and they all work. But this simplifies it. It kind of explains it in the sense that happiness is something that is always with us, or can potentially always be with us, and all we have to do is just focus on that feeling. Because again, we've got to remember that happiness is really no more than a feeling. It's an emotion, and it's like anything in life. If there's a beautiful sunset, right? But we're focused on driving or focused on something else, we don't see it. We can't appreciate it. We can't enjoy it.
So George, are you saying that it's a feeling, but it's a directed feeling? It's one that is always potentially there, and if we focus on it, then we're choosing it, and then we could use it.
Yeah, to take the inverse, if we think about our lives, there are things that we could become upset about or angry or sad or something. All we have to do is think about those negative things. Happiness is just the exact same thing. If we choose to, and with happiness though, it's not like we have to. We can, for example, become much happier by focusing on gratitude, by focusing on optimism, by focusing on these things that will lead us to greater happiness, and that works. But an easier way is to just bypass those routes to happiness, focus on happiness itself, focus on that feeling.
Yes, absolutely. And George, you're correct about that. And I also want to add, now that I'm listening to you and listening to what you're saying, focusing on what you're saying to me and to our viewers, another way to focus is to focus on what we're not focusing on, or when we're expressing a bad feeling or feeling bad, we can focus all of a sudden. When I use the word focus here, I'm using it in terms of being aware that we're doing that, and we can turn around and change the focus. If we're focusing here and we're not feeling good, we could change it and say, okay, now I'm going to focus here. Yes. And we can direct that, not based on circumstances or situations or what people are doing. We can decide to do that.
Exactly. Happiness, focusing on happiness really kind of requires what might be termed a hedonic vigilance. We've got to be vigilant about our emotions. Because a lot of times we'll just we'll be in a mood, and if anybody asked us, we'd have to say, oh, it's not all that great, it's not whatever, it's a problematic mood, right? But we kind of we live it without even paying much attention to it or identifying it. But with happiness focus, it's the idea, as you're saying, recognize when we're not as happy as we feel we should be, recognize when we're not feeling joy, and every time we recognize it, we've got to figure out what's the emotion. Is it frustration? Is it sadness? Is it whatever it is? Recognize it, and then that will give us the beginning of just the transforming that feeling, saying to ourselves, wait a minute, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is,
Right.
It doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
whatever negativity we're feeling, we can say, listen, this is not necessary, and just return to our happiness. But again, noticing and focusing on that initial unpleasantness is key, because it really helps us to start that process of transforming.
As you were speaking, and I was noticing this, and I thought you did something that could help myself and the audience, and it's probably a changed state. You know, Rabbi Plitzkin talks about it with changing and altering states, snapping your finger, for example. As you were sitting there, you said when you're aware that you're in a state that's disempowering or unhappy, and you said that as soon as you become aware of it, and then you were trying to think of something to say, and then you went like that automatically. I don't even know if you realized you did it. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't.
Right.
But that alone, if you anchor in a positive state with that snap of fingers, you don't even have to think about what you're going to change. That could actually trigger the right state of mind for you, because you've got it anchored when you're feeling really good. Man, I feel good. Brings it all back. And that is how we can focus on what we want to. And I guess we're going to be talking about this. Instead of letting our thinking, our minds direct how we're feeling, we could turn it around and let our feelings tell our minds what to think, and how as it turns around, back to how we're feeling again. What a great loop that is.
Oh yeah, because basically it's the idea of having happiness be our guide. We can be guided, we can be reactionary, we can go through life just reacting to different things, and kind of following our emotions.
That's right.
Or just be led.
Being led.
Right, being led by how, let's say, maybe our parents brought us up, how our society brings us up, or just, we've come to wrong conclusions different times.
Yeah.
So we can be reactionary in that way, or we could let happiness be our guide. And the idea also here is that, in life, whatever we're doing, whether we're with friends, whether we're working alone, whatever we're doing, we're focusing on things. We have to. Right now we're focusing on shows. We're focusing on presenting information. But, while we're doing whatever we're doing, we should always keep a part of our focus, a very important part, really, a key part, on happiness, on enjoying, on realizing that, no, it's not just about doing whatever we're doing, it's about enjoying whatever we're doing.
Yeah, and, as you're talking about focus, I'm focusing on what you're saying, and the reason I'm doing that is I don't care if I can't think of what I'm supposed to say next. I don't think that's important. I think what's important is the information will come, or it won't come, but if I focus on what I want to be doing now and focus on feeling good, then everything flows naturally out of that state. And it's not one of these, I've got to remember to do this, and I can't forget to do that, or I'm going to beat myself up, or I'm going to think less of myself, or I didn't do what I wanted to do. All that stress and all that, stress and strain and, emotional upheaval, you could just let go of, and just focus on the moment, on the fact that we're here, we can be happy. We can also be unhappy. But I think what we're saying today is that it is focus that will bring us what we will experience. And we can't always blame it on circumstances and situations or even death. It's going to be what we focus on.
Exactly. Because, whatever, any kind of a negative state we find ourselves, any kind of a negative emotion, we're in that state, we're experiencing that experience because we're focusing on it. We, for example, we're driving along, we get a ticket, I don't know, some kind of a ticket, right? Then, we hear in the radio that we've just won some contest, won, a lot of money or something really good. So, our focus went from this unpleasantness to pleasantness, and it can come externally through events, through things that happen to us. But we don't have to rely on what's happening out there, really. If something quote unquote unpleasant or unfortunate happens to us, all we have to do is focus on our happiness and focus on remembering that whatever it is, generally, with very little exceptions, whatever it is, does not have to impinge upon our experience of happiness in any way.
Well, what you just said, I think, is the absolute truth about happiness, but I will also add that society doesn't really believe this because it hasn't used it enough to understand that that is the way reality really is. We think that if something bad happens to you and you don't react badly, if you don't focus on the bad, that you're either in denial, as some psychologists might say, or that you're just not playing with a full deck, because how can anybody be happy about something like that happening when people don't realize that we have the power through focus, through one of the things called focusing, to experience what it is we set up to experience, what it is we want to experience. You know, it's pretty much like saying, you come to my house and you know, you see me watching TV. I go, hey George, how are you? I'm watching TV right now. And you say, you like that show? I go, no, I hate this show. I said, do you usually watch this show? Yeah, I watch it all day long, but I hate this show. And you say, did you know you could change the channel? You go, what channel? I didn't know there's a channel on a TV set. That's what focusing is. Yeah, there's lots of things on lots of channels. If you don't like one, you can change it. And I don't think we understand we've got that kind of ability as human beings.
Yeah, and even like some people will say, well, how about something like death? I mean, death is definitely horrible. You know, death is
Sure.
down and all. But I mean, I used to practice Orthodox Judaism back in the mid-'80s, and basically with a lot of religious Orthodox Jews, you know, you talk about death to them, hey, when's it coming? I mean, because like, I think this is true for Christians and Muslims also. It's the idea that, you know, if you see something in a certain way, like death, that's so horrible to certain people, if you see it as an entryway to this wonderful experience that makes this experience like totally insignificant, makes this experience pale in comparison, then even death, this great dread and threat that most of us feel, can be overcome. So yeah.
Okay, so what you're saying is that here's death. If you focus on the darkness and the gloominess and despair and the end of it all, and you know, your own egotistical death, then that's one focus that you can have. Or you can have a focus of brightness and lightness and freedom and connection to love, and you can have, you know, whatever religious and spiritual feelings that go with that for you. But it could be an uplifting one, and then your focus has changed what is, you know, what we might view as reality. Reality isn't reality. It's how we focus on it. It's whether we're going to take the dark side or the light.
Right. Now, I guess, you know, we're getting kind of into the area of belief, because what happens is, like, you know, it's easier to focus on the pleasantness of a certain experience like death if we believe that it's going to be a pleasant experience, if we believe that, you know, that going through that is going to actually be better.
Well, I want to say one thing. We're faced with death every second of the day. I mean, I'm sorry, I travel on the Connecticut highway, so I'm faced with death as soon as I get off the exit, or maybe even before, and drive into traffic, okay? And the fact that we face death, everybody does, especially the way we drive lately, means that it isn't a belief system. You have to face it. So if you have a better attitude about death, that gets you to live a more happy existence right now, and probably a much healthier one, with the right views on death. I don't think it has to be beliefs in that sense.
Well, yeah, attitude, belief. I mean, you know, it's how we view it, how we, you know, what we expect from it. Okay, happiness is also, I think, about focus in the sense that it should really be our purpose. I know before I said that, you know, we're called upon to just do a lot of things, to be in a lot of different situations through our day, with people, working, just engaged in activities that demand a certain amount of our attention and focus. But in terms of focus, we should always remember that whatever we're doing, everything that we're doing, every moment of every day, has its value, has its utility in helping either ourselves or those around us feel happy or become happier. So then when we have that focus, when we have that understanding, and focus on happiness as our purpose in everything, and in every action, every moment of each day, then that puts everything else in perspective. Then we're more easily able to not focus on problems, because if we're focused on the happiness, then whatever problems may exist simply don't matter. They're just insignificant because we keep our focus. It's like there's an expression, keeping our eye on the prize, keeping our eye on what we most want, and having everything else just become increasingly insignificant.
Yeah, I think you're right. And if we just go through life with that kind of focus, then I think we have better things happen to us, or at least we don't create our own, living nightmare.
Right. A lot of times our negative experiences will have to do with either the past or the future.
So true.
Yeah, like, for example, sadness is generally, thinking about the past, thinking about something that we think we've lost, that we feel we need. Fear, worry, is generally future-oriented. We're like, we're afraid that something will happen that's going to diminish our happiness. Now, there are certain ways to address both sadness and fear, in the sense that, like, with sadness, we've got to realize that whatever we lost, and life is like we gain things, we lose things all the time. So
Change.
Whatever we lose or gain really doesn't have to affect our happiness. And with fear of the future, like, according to researchers, 90% of what we worry about never happens. So just understanding from that perspective why it's not necessary to become sad or fearful works. But, in terms of focus, we can simply understand that letting our minds go to the past or to the future is really a decision we make. It's really a choice of focus that we make. And so that just by, like, every time we find ourselves going to an unpleasant past, because the past can be pleasant and the future can be pleasant. So anytime our experience of the past or the future is unpleasant, then all we have to do is recognize that, wait a minute, we don't have to be there. We don't have to be in an unpleasant past or future when we can remain in the present and generate as each moment goes by, pleasant feelings.
You're right, and I think that the past certainly is a sort of a trap of awareness that we sink into, and many people just don't find their way out again because they either want to, they're so enmeshed in the past, something good that they think was good, and maybe they're overplaying that in their minds as well, or something bad that they just can't let go of. And what they're doing with something bad or something in the past is they're dragging it with them to this present moment. So even though it was in the past and it could all be over with if they just let go of it, they focus on it now, so they create it now, and they drag it with them. And so they take something they don't like out of the past, and they have to live with it every day. So it isn't really rational, to say the least. And that's why this whole presentation on happiness and focusing on happiness in the moment is so very important.
Yeah, because, I mean, in a certain sense, that's where our life is. It's always in the moment. And again, we can draw pleasure from the past and the future by thinking about it. But, if those thoughts are going to be unpleasant, then certainly that's not a necessity. We definitely don't have to focus there. Another thing is, like, a lot of times we're focusing on our emotions, on our thoughts. And, we can. I mean, like, we can think thoughts that will create happiness, and if we find ourselves thinking thoughts that create unhappiness, we can, like, choose to stop those thoughts. But a lot of times we don't realize that, like, an emotion, has a psychological component. It also has a physiological component. I mean, it's each of the emotions, they've done research on this, each of the emotions that we experience has kind of like its own fingerprint. They're very similar in a lot of ways. You would think that, like, a lot of emotions, negative emotions, positive emotions, are physiologically dissimilar, but a lot of times they are similar in certain ways. But the idea is that, happiness is an emotion, a feeling that we not only experience psychologically in our mind through our thoughts and our cognitions, but also it's in our body. It's in every cell of our body. Sometimes holistic New Age people think of this in terms of, like, just having consciousness in every cell of our body. I'm not sure about that. I haven't studied that, but it's just that idea that yes, the feeling of happiness is physical. And, like, all we have to do sometimes is just, like, sit in a chair and just focus on the feeling of happiness in our bodies. I mean, we get experience in this.
Yeah, you're so right. I think one of the problems with maybe even the Western civilization is that our idea of being in the body is being in the head, and we're not really in the body, we're just in our head. And when we're in our head, what we really are is not in our body, we're in our thoughts. So our experience of being in the body is thinking through our head, and we consider that being in the body, when that could be one of the reasons we have so many ailments, because we're not connected to our body at all. We have no feedback. We're not in communication in a large sense with our needs of the body, or even the pleasures of the body, in the sense that sometimes we want too much. Maybe an idea of happiness in the body, this may seem strange to people, would just be an awareness that you have a physical sensation in your left hand without looking at your left hand. You just feel you're in touch with the fact that there's a left hand there, inside of it. I'm not talking about the outside or the air hitting it. But you could just feel a sense that you have a left hand, a right hand, a left foot, a right foot, and you have a sense that this is your body, and it feels wonderful. It isn't, glorious from the standpoint that, hey, I won the lottery. Boy, I got a left foot and a right foot. No, it's not that kind of realization. It's subtle, but it makes you feel focused in the moment. It brings you to, what does this do? What's the purpose of it? The purpose of it is when you're focused in your body, you're not letting your mind run you out into oblivion with negative thinking and with things that may have happened, or with just the way we irrationally think about things, and then that makes us unhappy. So there's a safety valve there, and it's called the body. We don't inhabit it very much.
That's very true. There's an expression, a common expression that goes something like, "Don't just sit there, do something," right? We're familiar with that. And
you want to use the opposite.
Well, yeah, I've seen it as a title of a book.
Yeah.
It's I think by a Buddhist monk or a yogi or someone. It's "Don't just do something, sit there."
That's great.
Yeah, and it's
great.
important, because what happens is, like, when we're just running around doing a lot of different things, we're getting things done, but we are more out of touch with how we're feeling, with that experience of being. So just by taking the time to just to have what we're doing being happy through experiencing the feeling of being alive, the feeling of in our body of this physical pleasure, I mean, that helps us to kind of like to hone in. It helps us to get in touch with it. It helps us to get in touch with what happiness feels like. Because a lot of people in the world, you ask them, are they happy? What's happiness? A lot of people, they can't tell you automatically. They can't. It's something that they're out of touch with.
Well, George, if I may, a thought that intrigues me about what you just got me into this state is that when we're unhappy, what we're really entering into is a mind thought pattern where we're locking ourselves into our stories about me, poor me, look what happened to me. And when we do that, we're only going to be unhappy. So the difference is that when you're happy, you're really freeing yourself of thoughts, and you're focusing on what it is you want to experience, not what your thoughts make you, imprison you to experience. And that's the difference. You can free yourself from your thoughts if you use the power of focus and your power of intention to what you will focus on and what you want to experience.
Right, because an important point, I think, is that thoughts can be a route or a road to happiness. We can think certain thoughts, and those thoughts will induce happiness. But it's not the thoughts that we're after. It's not the thoughts that are the prize. It's not the thoughts that really are our main goal. The main goal is that feeling. So probably the most direct way to happiness is even bypassing the thoughts. Because again, like if we deal with thoughts, thoughts can are subject to this kind of like a cognitive evaluation, this judgment. Is it a good thought or a negative thought? Is whatever we're thinking about pleasant, unpleasant, desirable, undesirable? So just being able to like bypass thought is a wonderful way to just be very in touch with what happiness really is most about.
I think whatever we do, whether we're feeling our body, directing our positive thoughts, I think it's important to choose positive things, because again, we have the choice again to focus on an event, and then we could view it as something bad, it happened, or we could view it as potential for the good. We actually don't know which way it really is. We don't know if it is good or bad, actually. And so if we really don't know, why fight what has already happened? Why not accept it? And with less resistance, we certainly can increase our happiness with less resistance. And I think that using our focus from that point, whether it's to reframe an event, to look at the powerful side and the redeeming side of it, it may be bad for us, but it may be good for 100 people, and that's okay. Why not look at the positive side? Why not focus on what has happened and accept it? Why not use that as a focus?
Oh yeah. That is so important, because I mean, we have, we're in a world where things are happening all the time, and our mind, at this stage in our evolution, is pretty much habitually conditioned to evaluate things, to judge things, to determine their rightness and wrongness. But as we're becoming increasingly aware of, through like Peele's The Power of Positive Thinking, through research on optimism, we have the ability and the power to focus on that aspect of whatever we're thinking about, considering, in the most positive way. And this, you've got to be able to use this in everyday situations and in the worst of situations. For example, like the wars, the tsunami that struck the southeast, Asia. Basically, it's the idea you can dwell on the misery that was experienced, the loss of life and property, etc., and that's not going to feel very pleasant. You can focus, though, if you're a religious person especially, this works very well, the fact that those who died, are in a better state. Anytime there's death involved, automatically you can consider they're in a better state. If you can't evaluate it in whatever is happening in a good way, something, because I'm bringing up something that's difficult for purpose, because a lot of people say, well, yeah, that you can do this in everyday events, but what about these major crises? Even with a major crisis, leave it open at least. Leave it open. I mean, we know that in our personal lives, things that are unpleasant will happen to us a lot of times for our own good. We go through some growing pains and our life becomes better. So again, with these global events, it can be the same way.
Great. Well, I hope you enjoyed our talk on happiness and focus. And remember, what you focus on expands. Let's make it happiness. Well, that's just about all we have time for today. Thanks very much for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life, be good, think well, feel very happy, and I hope we'll see you again next week on The Happiness Show. Bye-bye now.
Happiness is powerful. It's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.